The Babe, Crazy Legs, Dizzy and Daffy, Stan the Man, King James. Nicknames are as much a part of sports as strikes, touchdowns, slam dunks, and goal line stands. In Mississippi, we've had Sweetness, a Bruiser, a Boomer, a Bambi, and a guy named Boo. Deuce McAllister had a nickname before he learned to drive, Deuce. A moniker hung on a young halfback that foreshadowed the splendid driving force he would become in college football and the National Football League. From a small community of Ludlow, Deuce grew up a hard-working member of a farm family. His father and grandfather had row crops, cattle, and chickens. Deuce's dad dropped out of high school to raise a family and also drove 18-wheelers, which gave the youngest McAllister son a passenger's side view of the world. His family molded him. He learned the importance of hard work and providing for his loved ones. In exchange, that family introduced him to sports.
With a lot of cousins and nephews, my grandmother's house was the meeting place, and whether it was basketball or football, it was all played out in the yard. Whatever season it was on television, that's kind of what we played.
Soccer was his first love, then basketball. But as he grew, he was over 6 feet tall as a 7th grader. He began to focus on football. McAllister was born into the Morton-Forest rivalry, one of the fiercest in the state, indeed the entire Southeast. His Panthers took on those Bearcats in the yearly battle for the golden chicken, a nod to Scott County's tradition in the poultry industry.
To this day, I tell the kids from Morton, we don't hate them, but we darn sure want to beat them. Scott County, that rivalry has been around for the longest of time. It's kind of like the Egg Bowl with Mississippi State and Ole Miss. There's a friendly rival. That week, Forest Week, you want to win. And my 4 years against Forest, I lost 3. I was only able to beat them my senior year in football. And I was vice versa for basketball. I only lost to him 1 time.
A dominating career at Morton garnered attention and accolades. But he was not one of the Clarion Ledger's dandy dozen. That bothers him to this day.
Yeah, I was hurt. And I think a lot of it falls back to my junior year. Had some decent numbers, but as a team, we had a losing record. So that hurt. That hurt as far as the people being able to know who you are, teams being able to know who you are. But as far as some of the camps that I was going to and some of the invites that I was getting, as far as, you have to remember, this was before all of the internet and recruiting stuff kind of blew up. It kind of started to get a little bit big as I was coming out, but definitely not like it is, 15, 20 years later. I was being recruited by the Notre Dames. I was being recruited by Oklahoma. I was being recruited by, Miami, by Florida. And pretty much all of the SEC, the Alabama, the Ole Miss, the Mississippi State. But I couldn't be one of the top 12 players. And so for me, it hurt me. But at the same time, it was fuel to the fire. I had to go and prove and show I'm one of the best players in the state. And even a lot of the questions, well, what are you playing? Is he a running back? Is he a wide receiver? Is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? Because Morton, we were a 3A school, or a smaller school, but we didn't have some of the resources of the bigger schools. And so that was the question, and all I wanted to do, I just wanted a chance to touch it. I wanted a chance to touch the football because I felt like if I could touch it, I could do some special stuff with it.
The pain didn't last long. He was heavily recruited by some of college football's best programs, but he decided the state of Mississippi hadn't seen the last of Deuce. He was a rebel at heart.
I had a cousin that went to Mississippi State, and most people don't know how close it was for me going to Mississippi State, but for the longest I thought that's what I would do. But I gave Coach Tuberville a chance. I gave him a chance. Going into my senior year, you would have never told me that I was going to Ole Miss, to go to school. But they did a great job of recruiting me, and that's basically, at the end of the day, who it came down, neck to neck, one-on-one. Mississippi State signed JJ, and so, there was going to be a little competition. He would have been there for 2 years with me, but Kiefer McGee passing away, obviously, bless his soul, he would still have been there. at State. And so the depth chart to come in and play, I would have been down the line a little bit. And, I just felt like I had the best opportunity to play early up at Ole Miss. And, they had one senior running back, John Avery. And, it just opened up for me. And I just felt like when Terrence Metcalf committed there, he's the #1 player in the state, offensive lineman, and I knew that I could run behind him. It made it easy.
College football started a little differently for Deuce. Head coach Tommy Tuberville saw him as a linebacker, thinking his speed and size would fill a position void for the Rebs. Deuce wasn't fond of that, not at all.
My first 3 or 4 practices, I was on offense. My next couple of practices, Coach Tubb moved me to defense, and I was crushed. I was hurt. Because he was basically opening up the door to say, okay, Coach Tubb saw me as one of the great Miami linebackers when he was defensive coordinator down there. He saw me as a Ray Lewis or, a Darren Smith, one of those guys that he had coached before. I was heartbroken. I'm literally packed up my truck, ready to come home. I had called Coach Big Daddy, James Carson, down at Jackson State, and told him, I want to come home. I meet with Coach Tuberville, and he just told me to give it a day or 2. And so it was about 2 days later, John Avery, once the older guys reported, John Avery sprains his ankle, and they have to move me back to offense.
After an incredible Rebel career, the NFL was next. He was invited to the draft in New York City, but decided the option of sitting and waiting was not for him. So he stayed at home, awaiting his fate in the company of friends and family.
This is when we're talking about that each round was 15 minutes, and the pick sits back in the green room. A couple years before, there was an individual that had been back there for about 6, 7, 8 hours. I didn't want that to be me.
His NFL dream was now a reality, something the childhood Deuce knew would happen, but the high school and college-stage Deuce knew would be extremely difficult. Being a Saint, a dream come true. More often than not, the Saints are Mississippi's pro football, and New Orleans is close enough for the family and friends to stay connected to his career. Plus, the Saints have some of the best fans in the NFL.
And obviously I know what it meant to be a Saint. I know what it meant to the city of New Orleans. And it became so much more special after Katrina, because you had people that for 3 hours, you were their hope.
Deuce was immediately part of that frenzied tribe that puts a fleur-de-lis and black and gold on their babies when they are born. Who dat? A battle cry in the state and throughout the Gulf South. McAllister's career came full circle in Mississippi. Even though his pro career took him over the border across the great river, he never left people's hearts. Deuce became part of the narrative that is Mississippi sports history. He's just honored to be part of that history.
What was your biggest thrill in Mississippi sports?
For me, Mississippi sports, just looking at the history. You arguably have the greatest wide receiver to ever play in the NFL from Crawford, Mississippi. You arguably have the greatest quarterback to ever play in the NFL. You could say with Brett or even Steve. You talk about the greatest offensive lineman, obviously whether he's a left tackle or right tackle, you look at what Jackie Slater was able to accomplish. And then you talk about the greatest running back of all time being Walter Payton. That doesn't happen. And, that doesn't happen. People can knock us for a lot of things, but the athletes that we've been able to send out, just in football alone, speaks for itself. And I haven't even talked about the defensive side. I haven't even talked about the defensive side of the ball, where you got guys that were part of, the Steel Curtain. You've got guys that have won multiple Super Bowl rings, all here from Mississippi. It's amazing.
Knowing he had the chance of a lifetime, Deuce formed the Catch-22 Foundation as his way to give back to those who launched and sustained his career. And if there's another Deuce McAllister out there, He will try to help any way he can.
One of the things that I learned, it wasn't just about me. I've learned that the next Deuce McAllister is on his way. He's either here or he's on his way. If I can open up a door for an individual, a kid, that knows that he can go and be successful, and he can use soccer, baseball, academics, football, basketball, track as an avenue to make his life better, that's the least I can do. I had numerous coaches to pick me up from Ludlow, to pick me up from Morton. I walked the practice, the soccer practice. I walked the baseball practice. I had coaches to bring me to Jackson to play against some of the better competition. They didn't have to do it. So the least I could do when I got in the position, let's go help this kid. Let's go help this team. Let's go help this kid with books. Let's help this family. That's the least I could do.
A complete person, an amazing teammate, family member, and community advocate, Deuce McAllister has earned his spot in history, his nickname, one of the greatest, and his play and career put him here, the newest sports legend introduced into the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame.